Hey guys, how's it going? So today we're gonna keep on reading some reports. The idea here is to explore a few protocols and see, once again, take this. English is not my first language, so don't mind my bad reading. I'm sorry for that. And also just approach these as I am like completely, new to security. I've been doing that for maybe a few months now. So all my experiences around maybe a few CTFs and other things. So yeah, let's dive into Vader. So we're gonna start from Vader protocol today and let's do it. So let's first try to understand if Vader protocol is still around. Just doing that. Check something here. Okay. Hey Lingui, how's it going? Now I'm doing some report reading here. And just looking around to see if Vader protocol is still around and what's been going on with their project. Yeah, looks like something maybe. Well, they are listed in a bunch of places. Not a lot of volume though, and liquidity seems to be pretty well. Let's take a look at the report and let's go first for the high findings. Lingui, feel free to talk, whatever, to open your mic. This is a open conversation, okay? So yeah, just feel free to talk and say. Can you hear me? I cannot hear you. I don't know if the audio is coming. 1 second. Maybe the audio is coming from some different. Oh, I should be hearing you, not hear you though. Don't know if you're talking though. I'm gonna go for the report reading. So the first error we have here is the handle return of transfer in transfer out of pools.sol. ERC20 implementation are not always consistent. Some implementations of transfer and transfer from could return false on failure instead of reverting. It's safer to wrap such calls into a required statement to handle these failures. The transfer on call, let's take a look at the transfer. Not now. The transfer here on call 211 of the transfer out function could be made on a user supplied and trusted token address from different call sites whose implementation could be malicious. For reference, see similar finding from consistent diligence audit of AV2 protocol. Recommendment requirements to check if the return value and revert or false uses OpenZeppelin safe ERC20 wrapper function. So we had a dispute here and someone was commenting that this finding is not valid since the funds came in and did not revert. They leave. If the call passes, then the transfer is valid. Not valid, since the funds came in and did not revert, they can leave. If the call passes, then the transfer always is valid. So looks like the flow of the transfer here won't allow for invalid transfers because they can only leave if the funds come in and if the call passes. Didn't quite understood, to be honest. Gonna open the code here. I kind of know what the code is talking about, but let's just take a look anyway. The function here, the transfer, is not wrapped in a require statement. Ideally, I guess, what would you have here would be something like, let's make pop-up remix here really fast, just to give an example of what we're talking about. And just as a reference, we pretty much needed to add a require here. And let me see if I can show that on remix really fast. Sorry, because my computer is going through some problems right now, but it should be solved soon. Let's open contracts, and we have a mock contract here. We're kind of doing a CTF, so don't mind the code. I'm simply gonna add this function. It's gonna be valid because this is completely different code, but I think the whole thing here was to wrap the whole condition into a requirement statement, make sure that this did not revert during the process. Though what's being said here is that the funds need to come in, which is interesting, you know. Let's keep on going to the next finding. So, a flash attack mitigation does not work as intended in USDV.sol. One of the stated protocol goes, one of the stated protocol goes is to detect susceptibility to any attack vectors using flash lows on anchor price, since, or landing. As such, USDV contract aims to protect against flash loans using flashproof modifier, which uses the following check in isMature to determine if the current executing contract context is at least block delay duration ahead of the previous context, latest block where the transaction came from, plus the delay gotta be smaller than or equal the block number. So any of you guys understood what that means? I'll read it again because I didn't. One of the stated protocol's goal is to detect susceptibility to any vectors using flash loans on anchor price, since, or lending. As such, SDV contract aims to protect against flash loan attacks using a modifier called flashproof, which uses the following check in isMature to determine if the current execution context is at least block delay duration ahead of. Okay, so what we're saying here is that we're making sure that every transaction happens after or at least below a certain block, so you don't have money coming in and out in the same block and doing some crazy thing. Okay, however, the block delay state variable is not initialized, which means it has the full ewing value of 0. So unless it's bigger or equal 1 by set parameters, which can only be called by the DAO, which currently does not have the capability to call set parameters function, block delay will be 0, which allows for current execution context. So I can come in and out of the block, manipulating value, which allows current execution context to be the same as the previous one. This effectively allows multiple calls on this contract to be executed in the same transaction of a block, which enables attacks as opposed to what is expected as comment on line 41. Stops an EUA from doing a flash loan attack. So let's take a look in the code because that would be really interesting to see. Guys, can you hear me? Is the connection okay? Can you hear me, Lingui? This is a very strange function. We do have the check for the timestamps equal the next error emitting. Then we take the seconds per error and add to the timestamp from the variable contract. Then we take a look at balance. Then we go for each one of the shares. So your balance divided by 2. Then we convert. Now my question is, where's the comment that it says that it should stop the flash low and attacks? Let me take a look what was written there. Let me copy these. Guys, I mean, if you're advanced, if you already know a lot of Solidity security, maybe this is not the video for you. We're doing slow and low research, okay? So let's keep on. Didn't find this in the code. Even if the DAO can call set params to change the block delay to bigger than 1, there is a big window of opportunity for flash attacks until the DAO votes finalizes and approves such proposal. Moreover, such proposals can be cancelled by the DAO minority or replaced by a malicious DAO minority to launch flash attacks. Awesome. Recommended initializing block delay to bigger or equals 1 at declaration in the constructor. Okay. So we need to put like a rule in the constructor that will say that if you're gonna start this, it's gotta be bigger than 0. This issue is actually simply block delay state is not initialized, is not intended to be initialized. So this is a bug, severity 2. Okay. Let's go for the third bug. Missing DAO functionality to call change DAO function invader.sol. Change DAO is authorized to be called only from the DAO, but the DAO contract has no corresponding functionality to call change DAO function. As a result, the DAO address cannot be changed. Let's take a look in the code and let's read it again. Change DAO is authorized to be called only from the DAO, but the DAO contract has no corresponding functionality to call change DAO function. As a result, DAO address cannot be changed. So basically there's no interface from the DAO contract to call the change DAO function. Let's take a good look in the code and see if we can spot the problem. Can you hear me? Yes, okay. Only DAO. But the DAO contract doesn't have an interface to interact with this. Yeah. Okay, so apparently we need to add the change DAO functionality to reader.sol, and the judge commented that unlike the issues mentioned, without this functionality, missing functionality in the DAO becomes a very serious issue. As a result, this one is a very high risk where it's to be overlooked. We need to do a video talking about ranking and balancing of ranking and balancing of severity. You know, there's actually a standard to do that. Proposals can be cancelled, okay? Anyone can cancel any proposal by calling DAO cancel proposal with old proposal equals new proposal. This always passes the minority check as the proposal was approved. An attacker could launch a denial of service attack on the DAO governance and preventing any proposals from being executed. So basically, if, well, this is very interesting and a really high one. Do we have the code for that? Let me see if we have the code for that. These older Code4Arena reports not always have the reference to the code, but I guess we had the code open, just leave it open, right? Very interesting how they use GitHub to set up the everything, right? So the idea here was to use the cancel proposal. So let's go for it. Yes. And just pass the same IDs. And that would lead to a problem. The problem is actually that anyone can cancel any proposals, okay? Because there's no check for the IDs. So I can send unrelated IDs to cancel a proposal. Very interesting. A governance kind of attack. Let me just do a little bit of a check here on OBS because I want to make sure that everything's being recorded. And guys, I'm new at this, so be patient with me. Yes, I think we have a good thing going. Okay. And now we have one that says flash loans can affect governance in voting.sol. Flash loans can significantly increase a single voter's weight and be used to impact the voting outcome. A voter can borrow a significant quantity of tokens to increase their voting weight in a transaction within which they also deterministically influence the vote outcome of their choice. So let's read it again. Flash loans can affect governance voting in DAO.sol. A flash loan can significantly increase a single voter's weight and be used to impact the voting outcome. A voter can borrow a significant amount of tokens to increase their voting weight in a transaction within which they also deterministically influence the voting outcome of their choice. This has already happened in the case of MakerDAO governance, where a flash loan was used to determine the voting outcome and was noted by the Maker team as a practical example of the community that flash loans can and may impact existing governance. So let's just take a quick look at this to see if we can see any code or just start call posts, you know. So people were discussing this by 2020. Link, you were a hero, man. If you're really here, you're a hero. Let's go. And let's go to this one. Flash loans can affect governance. Yeah, we already saw that part. Now let's go for. Given that flash loans are a noted concern, the impact of the DAO governance, which can control parameters, should be mitigated in other places. Recommending accounting for flash loans in count member votings by using the weight of the previous block, or consider capping the weight of individual voters. Not valid. All pools use slip-based fees, so flash loan attacks by buying up USDV or cents are not going to work. What the judge says is that the funds to execute this attack do not need to come from a pool. It could be done as simply as a malicious member pulling their funds in a flash contract and each borrowing their funds in turn to vote. So I don't know if that was considered like a valid or not in the end, because the judge wasn't really conclusive here. I mean, he was, but maybe I'm not getting. So he's saying that the funds to execute this attack do not need to come from a pool, could be done as simply as a malicious malicious member pulling their funds in a flash loan contract and each borrowing the funds in turn to vote. It's a very interesting attack. So everyone gets a little bit of money and then you do that. I get really freaked out that my audio is not being recorded, but yeah, it's working. Okay. Incorrect burn or incorrect burn address invader.sol. Okay. The internal transfer function is called from a external facing transfer from, and transfer to functions, all of which have different sender addresses. It is message.sender for transfer, sender parameter for transfer from, and TX origin. These different senders are reflected in the sender parameter of the transfer function. While the sender parameter is correctly used for transfer of tokens within the transfer, the call to burn on line 129 incorrectly uses message.sender as a burn address, which is correctly only in the case of transfer calls context. The incorrect sorry, I'll read that again, okay? These different senders are reflected in the sender parameter of the transfer function. While the sender parameter is correctly used for transfer of tokens within transfer, the call to burn on line 129 incorrectly uses message.sender as the burn address, which is correct only in the case of the transfer called context. This is incorrect for transfer from and transfer to called context. Okay. So that means that whenever you're calling transfer from and transfer to, the person executing the transfer may not be message.sender, could be someone else. So a very, I would say, an interesting finding in my view. 1 second. Okay. So let's keep going. This will incorrectly burn fees from a different account for all users of the protocol interacting with transfer to, and transfer from functions, and lead to incorrect account of token balance or exceptional conditions. Protocol will break and lead to fund loss. Recommended change the line to specifying the sender instead of using message.sender. Let's go. Wrong calculation of asymmetric share. Okay. The inline comment defines the number of asymmetric shares as this complicated mathematic calculation. But the utils.calc asymmetric share functions compute that, okay, which is not equivalent and can be seen as 1, okay, exponential to 2, in terms of the first, which does not occur in the second one. The associativity is wrong, and part 2 is not multiplied by p. The math from the specific spec is not correctly implemented and could lead to the protocol being economically exploited, as the asymmetric share, which is used to determine the collateral value-based tokens, could be wrong. For example, it might be possible to borrow more than the collateral put up. Recommended clarifying the context. This was defined as a valid. While with least the math is incorrect, in the current implementation is not yet implemented, so disagree with the severity. Interesting one. This one is again about calculation. I'm simply gonna put this, because yeah, Let's go for incorrect initialization gives IL protection of only 1 second instead of 100 days in halter.sol. Incorrect initialization of time for full protections to 1 second instead of 100 days, as indicated in the code comment, appears to be a test setting mistakenly carried over for deployment. Therefore, unless time for full protection is resetted to 100 days by set parameters, calling this function is missing functionality in the DAO. Yeah, so going back to the problem we saw earlier, that we couldn't call the set parameters function from the DAO. So I'm just gonna read that again, okay? So incorrect initialization of time for full protection to 1 second instead of 100 days, as indicated in the code comment, appears to be a test setting mistakenly carried over for deployment. Therefore, unless time for full protection is set to 100 days by set parameters, the impermanent loss protection rule of 100 days will not apply. This breaks a key value proposition of the Veda protocol, which is impermanent loss protection, as indicated in the specification. Impermanent loss protection, the deposit value for each member is recorded when they deposit. When they go to withdrawal, the redemption value is computed, and if less than the deposit value, the member is paid the deficit from the reserve. The protection issue increases from 0 to 100 linearly for 100 days. Recommend changing. Okay, so the recommendation here apparently is thereby set to 1 second to conduct the quick testing. Okay. I don't know if those are like valid findings or if this is just like we should have like this, this is actually valid or not, because you go and you reach this but you don't really know. This is really interesting knowledge. I really like the way that Let's keep going. For anyone can list anchors, create tokens. The halter.listAnchor function can be called by anyone, and tokens can be added. The only check is that required that the pool is anchor token, but this can be easily set by calling pools.add liquidity Vader token, even without actually sending any tokens to the contract. This makes essentially a useless check. Wow. This only works as long as the anchor limit has not been reached yet. The replace anchor can be used in the same way, and flash load can be used to get around the liquidity restrictions and push over another anchor token out of the price range, as these checks use the current reserve. So read that again. So the problem here is that anyone can call a function to list an anchor, okay, and that anyone can add their liquidity with their token, making the listing valid, okay, even without sending tokens. But this only works as long as the anchor limit has not been reached yet. However, the replaced anchor can be used in the same way, and the flash load can be used to get around the liquidity restrictions to push another anchor token out of the price range, as these checks use current reserves. Anchored pools are automatically curated pools and determine if the pool receives anchored pools are automatically curated pools and determine if the pool receives rewards. An attacker can remove rewards of a curated pool this way and add rewards to their own pool with a custom token in their control. Well, what the developer says is that we need to set is anchor token to true, and it seems strange without any further checks. Consider making list anchor and replace anchor DAO only functions and make them flash low unsecured. One should probably use a time weighted price for these pools. Then we have a dispute, and Vader saying um, the protocol is intended to be launched with 5 anchors, so it can only be attacked by using replace anchor, in which case slippage-based freeze applies for attacks and thwart the attack path. Okay. And let's go for the next one, which is swap token can be traded as fake base token. The pools.swap function does not check if base is one of the base tokens. One can transfer tokens to the pool and set base equals token and call swap token member to base false. The actual input will return the token amount added, but the use ratio compared to the base reserve yields a wrong swap result. It breaks accounting for the pool as tokens transferred in, but the base balance is increased and token balance decrease. LPs cannot correctly withdraw again, and sorry, I'm gonna have to read that again, okay? So the actual input is equal get added amount place token will return the token amount added, but use the ratio compared to the base reserve. Calc swap output receives the token, a mapping of the base amount, mapping of the token amount, and then we have a token divided by base token amount times token amount, which yields a wrong swap result. It breaks the accounting for the pool as tokens are transferred in but never transferred out, okay? But this balance is increased. LPs cannot correctly withdraw again and others cannot correctly swap again. Another example is that the token pool amount can be stolen, send tokens in of tokens pool and call swap. Depending on the price of token relative to base, it could be cheaper than trading with base tokens. This is a highly confusing protocol, highly confusing to understand audit just from reading like that. These old audits are really special in a way, you know. Get added amount can return wrong results. The get added amount function only works correctly when called with Vader USD pool or pool. However, when calling token pool, where token is neither Vader USDV or pool, it returns the wrong result. It gets the token balance is subtracted from the pool that stored it. So there's a mapping, okay, which can be that complete different token. Anyone can break individual pairs by calling sync token 1 with token 2. Where token 1 balance is less, this will add a difference to the map token amount and breaking the account and result in wrong swap logic. Furthermore, this can also be used to swap tokens without having to pay anything. Recommending adding a require statement in the else branch that checks if tokens equal pools. Valid fund can be lost. Wrong bundle with this issue. Very interesting. Can I see the code? So the problem is you have to call the sync function, then you have to inflate the mapping. Very interesting bug. Interesting the way these people see these things. For synthetics can be minted with fake base token, and we see that the fake base token seems to be a recurring problem, and something that I'm seeing that after reading these reports for a while is that one error usually leads to a lot of things. So you could find an error where the protocol will take a fake token and then 4 or 5 functions. So you're gonna have a lot of highs just by doing that. Okay, so maybe that's a tip for some people out there. So in the pools, means sync function does not check if base is one of the base tokens. One can transfer tokens to the pool, set base equals tokens, and call mint sync. The actual input, okay, let's go. Missing access restriction on lock units, unlock units. The pool lock units allows anyone to steal pool of tokens from a member and assign them to message sender. Anyone can steal a pool of tokens from any other user, recommending adding access control and require that message sender is the router or another authorized party. Valid, although this is partially complete lending code. Let's read it again. So the idea here is that anyone can steal token from a member and assign them to message sender. This is very interesting. Can I see the code for that? As always, let's see. Maybe we have it easy here. Let's take a good look here. Do we have the files or the code? Yes, so this function is external. You can pretty much remove the units for someone and add it to yourself. Quite a complicated one in the sense of letting it happen. Wrong slippage protection on token trades. The router swap syncs with limit allows trading to token, and specifying slippage protection. A token trade consists of 2 trades: a token to base and a base to token. The slippage protection of the second trade is computed wrong. So the way they do it today is they calculate the swap, take the amount, and take in the base amount. And this gotta be smaller than the slip limit. It compares the token input amount to the base reserve of the second pair. Slippage protection fails and either the trade is concealed when it shouldn't be or accepted even though the user suffered more loss than expected. Recommended it should be used the base output from the first trade to check the slippage protection. Note that this should just compute the slippage protection of each trade individually, and an even better way to come up with a formula to compute the slippage on the two trades at once. So people say here that's valid, although disagree with the severity. This wrongly compute slip amount will just fail the trade or allow the second trade to go through with no protection. Valid, although disagree with the severity. The wrongly compute slip amount will just fail the trade or allow the second trade to go without protection. Our decision metrics for severity. Oh, no risk. Code style, clarity of chain monitoring, excluding gas optimizations. But impact of the protocol, leak value. Funds can be stolen or lost. Value attack, recommendation. I don't know what they're saying. Let's go. Tokens can be stolen through transfer to. I know that it stated that Vader USDV since our employee transfer to function, which interrogates for TX orange and skips approval. The author does not subscribe to the belief that this is dangerous. In my opinion, it can be very dangerous. Imagine the following scenario. I created a custom ERC token that has a hook in the transfer function that checks for TX origin, calls the transfer to, and to steal this fund. I set up behind a pot providing liquidity to base and the attacker pool. I target high profile accounts holding these tokens, and I drop them 3 tokens. Block explorers Vader websites could show that this token has value and can be traded for actual base tokens. User wants to sell a drop token receive valuable tokens, though the Vader swap and other tokens were being stolen. In general, user wants to sell a drop token to receive valuable tokens through the Vader swap and has other tokens stolen. In general, a holder of any core assets of the protocol risks their funds being stolen if they are interacted with an vetted contract token. This could even be completed unrelated to the Vader protocol. Recommend and remove transfer to and use permit plus transfer from instead to move tokens. So yeah, we're coming back to the report of Vader protocol, and we're going to finding high 17. By the way, a lot of findings in this protocol. So transfer fee is burned on wrong accounts. The Vader transfer function burns the transfer fee on message sender, but address might not be involved in the transfer at all due to transfer from. So this was already noted by a researcher here. So I don't know if they treat it as a duplicate or what is the process. Smart contracts that simply relays transfers like aggregators have the Vader balance burn or the transfer fails. These accounts don't have any balance to burn, breaking the functionality. Recommend that you should first increase the balance of the recipient by the full amount, and then burn the fee on recipient. And then we have here a confirmed from Strictly Scarce saying that for composability with the rest of the ecosystem, this should be addressed, although disagree with the severity. No funds are lost, just the aggregator cannot transfer unless they first transfer to themselves, which most often do. And then Merlin commented, code style no risk, clarity of chain monitoring, exclude gas optimizations, and yeah, we just have the same for everything. Vault rewards can be gained. The deposit function increases the member weight by weight, so it calculates the value in base of the token, which is swap output amount when trading the deposit underlying synth amount. Notice that anyone can create sync custom tokens by calling. Therefore, an attacker could deposit a valueless custom token and inflate their memory weight as follow. Create a token and put a lot of tokens to the attacker. Create a synthetic of this token. Add a liquidity pool of this token to base by providing and a single way of token and one base token. This makes tokens very expensive against Wei. Mint some tokens by paying base to the pool. Deposit the fake syncs. Weight will be very high because the token pool price is so high. Call Rav Harvest with a sync with the actual value. This will increase the sync balance and it can be withdrawn later. So the idea here is you can pretty much send a fake token to the pool, manipulate the price, and calculate your harvest over that. We can see that this was considered valid. So this is a valid attack path. And as a complement, the warden says that the function completely disregards the sync parameter, which seems to be odd. Recommend thinking about making the rewards based on actual syncs deposit instead of a global weight tracker. Alternatively, widely certain syncs that counters the weight, or don't let anyone create syncs. Okay, widely certain things that counters the weight, or don't let anyone create syncs. This is the counter is twofold. In the vault, required is created token. This will only allow syncs of created tokens to be deposited for rewards. The creation logic does a check of the liquidity depth, so only the pools can become synced. To an attacker will need to deposit a lot of base. In the vaults, use this function called swap value in base, which computes the weight with respect to sleep. So a small manipulated pool cannot be legible. The pool will need to be deep. The vault converts all syncs back to common account asset, USDV, so member weight can be tracked. Disagree with the severity, since the daily rewards can be claimed by anyone in the theme beating war, but no actual inflation occurs. Vault rewards, next one. Let's keep going. Vault rewards, less claim time is not always initialized. The harvest calls call current rewards, which computes seconds in since claim. Okay, so when you call the harvest function, there's a calculation to show how many seconds since the last time you claimed. As one can claim different syncs than the syncs that they deposit, some of the mappings in the last time might not be initialized, and the second becomes the current time block stamp. The larger the seconds, the larger the reward. This bug allows for claiming huge chunk of rewards. Recommended users only harvest syncs that they deposit. Okay, so these are all problems that are linking to each other. This is because you can create any token, you can harvest a lot of. So this is very important in bug hunting. How to chain attacks to create a high. People talk about that, but reading reports, it becomes clear that these guys, they spend a lot of time thinking on how to turn these things into highs. So beware of that. Oh, I got. Okay, let me just do something for 1 sec. So that's the problem. How to tie. You need to think on that. How do I tie several small problems into a big problem? Let's go to the next one. The vault weight account is wrong for withdrawals. When depositing two different synthetic tokens, their weight is added to the same mapping. When withdrawing the full amount of one sync, the full weight is decreased. Okay, that means that if I deposit two different tokens and try to withdraw because everyone is using the same mapping. I'm gonna be, withdrawing everything, but this is pretty much wrong. So saying that the second deposit is essentially weightless. Users that deposit more than one synthetic cannot claim their fair share of rewards after withdrawal. Recommend that the weight should be indexed by the synth as well. This is valid. Nice. But there's no loss of funds, so it seems to always have this little discussion on this seems to be important. If there's loss of funds, which is I think a little bit obvious. So high 21. Anyone can avoid all vendor transfer fees by adding their address to vendor. Oh, so this is, I can already see that this is a access control problem. So vendor.sol implements a fee on every transfer unless either the sender or the recipient exists on the list of the excluded addresses. Wait, unless either the sender or the recipient is okay, so there's a list of addresses. However, add exclusion has no restrictions on who can call it. So yeah, we're missing a, let's see, what is the mitigation step? They say that the vendor contract is out of scope. Yeah, this is interesting because it's the first time we're looking at a out of scope situation, and I see that those have been happening more and more. So users may unintentionally remove liquidity under a phishing attack. The remove liquidity function in pools.sol uses TXR to determine if the person who wants to remove liquidity to determine who's the person who wants to remove liquidity. However, such a design is dangerous since the pool assumes that this function is called from the router, which may not be true. If the user is under a phishing attack, he could be unintentionally removing liquidity. So you would call a function that would call that, delegating the call, maybe preserving the context. Um, Recommender making the function external, which can be utilized by the router, providing information of which person removes liquidity. So I think this one is an interesting one. I'm gonna read it again. The remove liquidity function in pools.sol uses tx.origin to determine the person who wants to remove liquidity. So this means that a malicious person could create a contract in the middle and tx.origin will still be the sender. So let's take a look at the code. So here we're seeing TX origin being used instead of maybe message sender for this context. Awesome, nice one. I love easy findings. Let's keep going. Anyone can create pools and steal rewards. Okay. The create pool and replace pool don't have any access restriction. An attacker can get a flash loan of base tokens and replace the existing created pools with their own created pools. Created pools determine if a pool receives rewards. An attacker can remove rewards from a created pool this way and add rewards to their own pool with a custom token. Once again, a problem that ties in with the fact that you can put a custom token. So like if you send something to C4 and there's a problem in a function and you fuck the state doing that, it's over and you're gonna be paying a lot of money for one problem because it ties in with so many things. So very interesting concept. So incorrect initialization causes the Vader emission rate of 1 second. Once again, we saw this I'm guessing this is a duplicate. They will be dealing that. Let's go for the medium findings. And before diving into the mediums, I want to see how many mediums they have. And this is a very long, you guys can see this is a very long report. A lot of, usually we skip the lows. We go for medium and gas because we're gonna do one day just for, reading pretty much every low ever on Code4Arena. So let's go for the mediums. Perfect. User may not get impermanent loss protection if certain functions are called directly in pool.sol. So the function remove liquidity and remove liquidity directly when called directly do not provide the real user with impermanent loss protection, unlike calling the corresponding functions in halter.sol. This should be prevented at least for remove liquidity or highlighted in the specification or user documentation. Recommending adding access control via modifier only halters, so remove liquidity function post contract can be called only from the corresponding router's contract remove liquidity function, which provides impermanent loss protection. Yeah, nice. Was this valid? Yeah, valid and acknowledged. The user got the money. Second one is undefined behavior for DAO and grant vote proposal. Given that there are only 3 proposals that are actionable, it is unclear if DAO type check is a typographical error and should be grant. Otherwise, grant proposal will only require quorum 33% and not majority 50%. I recommend changing DAO to grant and specify what DAO proposals are and how grant proposals should be handled. This one is very interesting. In fact, let's take a look into that. So he's saying that probably there was a name in the misspelling the name of the signature of the function because he's saying that yeah, where grants are cheaper than they should be. Let's take a look at the code. Here. Let me go back to the explanation and say, given that there are only 3 proposal types, it's unclear if DAO is an error or and should really be grant. Otherwise, grant proposal. Okay, so what he's saying is that grants are not being checked here. Thus, they are going to a cheaper governance, fee. So yeah, interesting finding. This means that this dude was actually reading and understanding the protocol. Very interesting one. Okay, let's go. Lack of input validation in replace pool allows a curated pool limit bypassing alter.sol. There is no input validation in replace solve function to check if all token exists and it is curated. Using a non-existent old token, even 0 address, passes the check and will return 0 for a non-existing token. And a new token will be made curated, and this can be used to bypass the curated pool limit and enforce only curated pool function. Recommended check if the old pool exists, old token exists, and it is curated as part of validation. Is valid? Can we see the code? Just taking a look to see if we get to the code here.
Yo, 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 yo.
Yo, who's back with us? Yo,
Yo,
Miss,
hey,
what?
sorry, did I miss something?
I'm gonna share the.
Yeah, we're just reading the report. So let me pause the recording.
No, I'm following through. Yeah.
What?
Oh no, I'm following.
Well, okay. So lack of input validation in replace pool allows for. Yeah. So there's no input validation in this function to validate if the old token exists, like we just talked about. You can use a non-existing token, and we'll pass the check, and the function will return 0 for a non-existing token, and a new token will be made. Okay. So we have a medium number 4 saying that a flash proof is not really flash proof. The flash proof modifier is supposed to prevent flash loan attacks by disallowing performing several sensitive functions in the same block. However, it performs this check on TX origin and not on an individual user address basis. This only prevents flash loan attacks from happening within a single transaction. But flash loan attacks are theoretically not limited to the same transaction, but limited to the same block. As miners have full control of the block and include several vulnerable transactions back to back, think transaction bundles similar to Flashbot that most mining pools currently offer. A miner can deploy a proxy contract, relaying all contract calls, and call it from a different EOA each time by passing the TX origin restriction. The flashproof modifier do not serve its purpose. Recommend trying to apply the modifier to an individual address that interacts with the protocol instead of TX origin. Furthermore, the attacks are possible with flash loans are not usually possible for whales. Making it debatable if adding flash loan prevention logic is a good practice. So he's saying that only whales can do that, and the idea here is instead of, you know what TX origin does? Chase the light.
Yeah, I know the basics of it. It's where the transaction originated from,
Yeah, you know
and
that, Lingui? Yeah, go on, because I think Lingui is busy.
so I don't understand it fully, but like from what I do remember, like reading was that obviously there are two types of accounts. You have externally owned accounts and contract accounts. But I do believe that if you use tx.origin, you can actually manipulate a function which is only supposed to work for, let's say, a contract account. You can manipulate it to work for. I think it's the other way around. You can manipulate it to work for an externally owned account, or vice versa, one of the two.
So the idea
Um,
is that whenever you use message sender,
yeah,
unless you're using delegate calls, the context, meaning that the person that is initiating the transaction is always the entity that did it, so the wallet or the contract, okay? But
yeah,
when you
yeah.
use tx.origin, is the originator of the call. So if I have like 10 contracts in the middle of that, so a good way maybe that we can think on that is imagine I'm doing this function that is to unstake your tokens and send to an address, and this address is supposed to be your address. Cool.
Yeah, yeah, cool.
Now because I'm not using message sender, I'm using tx.origin. I can
Yeah,
create a contract that will look like something else, and when you click and interact with that contract, because I'm using tx.origin, I'm gonna be able to call the other contract as you know,
yeah.
even though there's a
Okay,
contract in the middle. So that was completely ignored because
right,
I'm using TX origin. So I could now take
right.
the tokens that you're supposed to unstake and get to myself. So yeah,
Okay, I
you know.
understand.
Yeah. So let's go to the next one.
But shouldn't
So
that be a high vulnerability then?
I think that this ties in with a lot of the highs that they have already. So it's kind of just a classification of these. Just looking, they're just looking at the X origin here. They are not looking at
Right, right.
any
Okay.
other, any other. So imagine this.
Implications.
So
Yeah.
you're doing an audit, and you need to. If you're smart regarding how you look at things, you're gonna get more
Yeah.
findings. You understand?
Of course. Yeah, yeah. Makes sense. So it's better to like split it into like multiple findings, I suppose. Is
Yeah,
that what you coming at? Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So let's see this one. M05 interest debt is capped after a year. Okay, so interest payment calculates the share, takes in the time elapsed, the year, and the interest payment considering the debt asset and the collateral asset. Okay, and share for the payment over 1 year. So, however, calculate shares caps the time elapsed 2 year. Therefore, the own interest does not grow after the year has elapsed. The impact is probably small. The only call so far that computes the elapsed time as which most likely never go beyond the year. This is a very specific protocol based finding. There's also those. There are things that you're gonna read in reports and you're gonna just ain't gonna understand because they are very specific to the protocol. They have like the BISTO. You can see that the researcher actually went through the code, and this is something that some people do and some not. Some people just try to find, just from overlooking the contract, try to find some findings and everything, and that works if you go on an error basis instead of a project basis. But I guess it depends on what is the bound size, and the way you can approach that. Let's look at.
So
Go on.
could you please scroll up a bit? I just kind of want to read that bottom part. Um, don't time stamp. Oh, okay, okay. So is it saying that the contract will not? So I don't really understand that vulnerability. Like,
Let,
what's the vulnerability there?
let's go. Let's go. Let's read it again. So, what the if you look at the title, you see that pretty much
Yeah.
whatever you put here, whatever your interest is, no matter the amounts you put, no matter all the rest, is gonna be kept after 1 year. So, however, therefore, the own interest does not grow after a year has elapsed. The impact is probably small because the only call so far that computes the elapsed time as block timestamp, mapping next era, collateral and debt, which most likely never go beyond a year. So he's saying that this protocol has a function that is
Yeah.
supposed to be eternal.
Right.
Most likely, people will never leave their assets here for 1 year. That's why he's saying that the chances are very small. But if you happen to do it, you're never gonna be getting rewards. Let's see if we can see
Right.
the code fix after 1 year, of course. Let's see if we can see the code fix or
I'm guessing that's medium because the likelihood is low.
yeah, because probably nobody will leave their money in the protocol for a year. By the way, yeah,
Right.
but better not to talk about that because
So
we're being
what happened to
recorded.
diamond hands?
Yeah, no, no. I mean, you can have diamond hands, but not inside someone else's smart contract, right?
Yeah, yeah. Sure.
So let's see. Concealed proposals can still be executed. So proposals that pass in the threshold finalized can still be concealed by a minority again using the conceal proposal function. It only sets the map ID votes to 0, but map ID time start and map ID finalizing stay the same and pass the check in finalized proposal, which queues the then for execution. Recommending setting a cancel flag and check for it in final proposal. Okay, so this is a clear one. You understood?
Yeah.
Yeah, the secure
That
one
makes sense.
apparently they are not, you know, they need to add a little bit of state to control what's actually concealed or not. So complete proposals can be voted and executed again. This one looks like a high, you know. Sometimes you're gonna see that too. You're gonna see these massive errors, like people can take money, and it's a medium because
Yeah.
you know some contract is part of the protocol, or you know, so there's always a little bit of, how do I say, what is the term for you know that not so official negotiation between you know two parties, you know, a little bit of a, you know, yeah, maybe I like the term to say that, but there's always a back and forth between the developer and the researcher regarding, you know,
Yeah.
how much money I'm gonna
The
give
very.
you and everything.
Mhm.
Maybe some developers are really creative, so they get one there and they can, you know, go with 10 findings from that. So yeah. Um, Complete proposals can be voted again and executed again. A proposal that is completed has a state reset, including the vote. Users can vote on it again and execute it again. A proposal that is completed, it has a state reset, including the vote. Users can vote on it again and it can be executed again. Completed proposal should most likely should not be allowed to be voted on and executed again. This could also lead to issues in backend scripts that won't expect any voting execution events to be fired again after the finalized proposal event has been fired. Recommending adding an execute flag to the proposal. It might be intended to have repeated proposal. You know, this is really like it might be intended, like it is or not. You know, like, give me the you know the straight pill. You know, but the idea here is that there's no validation to verify if certain proposal is already executed, and this may be intended in the behavior of the protocol. Let's go for divide before multiply. So this is mathematical, especially on Solidity. You wanna do the
Sorry
multiplication
about that.
first.
My Wi-Fi cut out. But I'm back now.
Yeah,
Um,
cool.
so I
No problem, no
can
problem,
proceed.
no problem. So divide before multiply, you know. Can't quite understand the assertion that a division is made before a multiply in the code outline. So yeah, this is a
I
always
have a
go on.
I have a very quick question. So I know that divide before multiply is not good, but like, didn't they recently like implement safe math into the newer versions of Solidity, so like it's no longer an issue? Isn't the issue fixed now?
But yeah, to be honest, I can't really tell you. I don't really know, but I believe that it's just a common mathematical norm to do that. You know, like it's just safer for your code overall. You know,
Right, sure.
but I'm probably, so let's just Google that really fast and see. You know,
Yeah.
multiply solidity. But I wanna see. I wanna try to go for maybe DZ or something so we can see.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, I don't know for sure, but I definitely remember hearing that they put the integrated safe math into the newer version, so it's no longer an issue. But I'm not sure if that's still like the actually the case or not.
Look, look. So even if you're using safe math, there's still some things to
Mm.
consider. So if you do this calculation here in this order, you're gonna get 3,000.
Mm. Right.
But if you divide first and then you multiply, then you're gonna get 2,000. I
Could you
don't know
please
if
send me
this
this link?
is a. I don't know if this is a, not always sufficient. Let's take a look. So you don't want to miss away, right? That's the. I guess that's the idea. I'm gonna send you the link.
Thank you.
No problem.
I think I sent you a. Oh, never mind. Yeah, voice chat is fine as well.
There you go.
So thank you.
No problem. Let's keep on. So incorrect operator used in deploy sync of pools. The deploy sync function in pulse.sol is expected to perform a check on the token parameter to verify if that is neither Vader or USDV before calling factory deploy sync function. However, the require incorrectly uses a OR operator instead of an AND, which allows both Vader to be and USDV to be supplied as token parameters. This allows an attacker to deploy either a Vader or token as synth, which will break the assumptions through the entire protocol, and funds may be lost. But this is a pretty bad one, and it was marked as a duplicate. So basically, there were there's really, and you can see that the researcher even understood like what they were supposed to do. This is also a big in our team. I'm seeing a lot of opinionated, researchers now. They're criticizing the code, and I'm a little bit scared of that, because well, we're not technically we shouldn't be looking at architecture, I guess, more at the her side, but I'm pretty sure some people got highly offended by what I'm saying. So let's keep on. M11, allowing duplicated anchors could cause a bias on anchor price. In router.sol, the setup of the 5 anchors can be interrupted by anyone adding a new anchor due to the lack of access control in the list anchor function. Also, duplicate anchors are allowed. If the same anchor is added 3 times, then this anchor biases the result of get anchor price. Ooh. Okay, so the idea here is I don't know what an anchor is, but you shouldn't be allowed to add, the same. So the problem is that in the setup of the 5 anchors can be interrupted by anyone adding a new anchor due to the lack of access control to the list anchor function. The setup of 5 anchors can be interrupted by anyone adding a new anchor. So the list anchor function doesn't have a check to see who's listing the anchors, and it should have. This was also noted as a high up there. Transfer fee avoidance. The function add_excluded allows the user to exclude an address from the fees for a cost of 128 V. By exploiting these conditions which fees are taken, it's possible to set up a contract for a one-off cost which all users can use to avoid transfer the fees. So they created a function that you could call to avoid paying the fees.
That's very interesting.
Yeah,
That's the
then
first I've seen
someone
that.
creates a contract, and then you just send the tokens to the contract. The contract calls, gets the peg, and pays you. Yeah, that's really a really
Oh my
nice
god,
one.
that's very very clever.
Yeah. Let's go for this one. The init function can be called by everyone. So this is a big in the proxy stuff. You're gonna see that people always forget to do proper initialization.
Yeah.
Um, most of Solidity contracts have an init function that everyone can call. This could lead to a risk condition when the contract is deployed. At a moment, a hacker could call the init function and make the deployed contract useless. Then would have to redeploy, costing a lot of gas. Not quite sure I understood, but the problem here is that
You
most
know, wouldn't that be a high severity? Because sometimes with init functions, they also define the owner.
this is probably
So
not a
in theory,
proxy. Probably they need function here means
oh, okay, okay,
something just init, just like get the address of
yeah,
the contracts and
yeah, yeah, yeah. Fair enough.
so this looks to me like lack of access control. Look, add a check that only the user could call that. Yeah, I mean, I don't like this one. This one shouldn't be. I don't know. I mean, you're not required to have an owner, but yeah.
Mhm.
Pull functions can be called before initialization in init of pools.sol. So there's no check basically. So probably there's a function doing something and there's no check to see if the pools have been initialized. So let's take a read. All the external public functions of pools.sol can be called by other contracts even before pool.sol is initialized. These can lead to exceptions, state corruption, and incorrect accounting in other contracts, which may require redeployment of said contract. Recommend using a factory pattern that will deploy and initialize the contracts atomically to prevent front running of the initialization. So here, instead of you yourself deploying both contracts and making them work by calling functions, you create a contract that deploys the contract, set up the function, and yeah. Or, given that the contract is not using delegate call proxy pattern, which is not required to use a separate init function. It is not required to use a separate init function to initialize the parameters when the same can be done in a constructor. If the reason for doing so is to get deployment addresses of various contracts which may not at all be available at the same time, then consider re-architecting to create a global contract which can hold all the contracts variables. See Maple's protocol. So here's, like you can see, there's a suggestion to change a little bit of the architecture of what the developer did, which is, a little bit audacious. Let's go. You guys still there? Maybe not.
Yeah, still following.
Okay. Change DAO should be a two-step process in vader.sol. So change DAO updates DAO address in one step. Okay, so this one is a classic one. Every time you're gonna do an update on a function, like a transfer owner, right? A transfer owner shouldn't happen like at once, Like you shouldn't be able to just transfer the owner, Ideally, you start a request to change the owner. So today you start, and in 2 days from here, you go and you call the function again to actually set the owner, Because let's say if a hacker gets the contract and he calls the function, you still have 2 days to go there and conceal, do something to avoid that. Maybe remove the money safely,
Yeah.
So when you see this, change DAO should be a two-step process. Let's take a look at the code. Most likely, they're just changing the address at once and not really considering what can happen. Yeah, you see, the only validation here is like, and then you should have one for the request timestamp. And yeah, so that's pretty much that. Let me just close this, guys. Let's go to copy and paste the bug leading to incorrect harvest rewards in vault.sol. The conditional in calc reward function uses the same code in both if-else part. You see, this is, I'm not even gonna read. This is the bug, okay? So the conditional uses the same code. Yeah. They even went to there's no phone. It's just like an error. I don't know how to deal with this. I don't know if I should get mad as a developer, as a researcher, or just say, okay, I'm gonna fix the code, but there's no payment. And Vader redeemed to member vulnerable to front running. The USDV balance of Vader contract is vulnerable to theft through Vader redeemed to member. A particular case is through USDV redemption. Users can redeem USDV through redeem from member. In the case of a user will need to send the USDV to the contract before redemption. However, as this process does not happen in a single call, this victim's call is vulnerable to front running and could have their redeem stolen by an attacker. Whoa. Okay, this is alright. This is also a nice way of putting it, He's actually talking about slippage, like how you're gonna have a little bit of slippage. but the way he put it is he's redeeming tokens stolen by attacker, which is still true because he's getting a little bit of your tokens. So here's, I think the problem here is there's a what did I say? Yeah, they're saying there's not valid. I didn't quite get this one. Yeah, I'm not going for the highs today. This is it for this